Question 1. Analysis of a significant road closure impacting a planned driving test route in Leicester. What is the most responsible and professionally sound approach for a candidate to take? Option A. Assume the closure will not significantly affect the test route and proceed with the original plan without seeking further information. Option B. Proactively check official Leicestershire County Council traffic updates or contact the test center directly for information on the road closure and its expected duration. Option C. Attempt to navigate through unmarked residential streets to find an alternative route, relying on intuition to avoid delays. Option D. Wait until the test appointment is about to be missed due to the closure before contacting the test center. Correct answer is B. Proactively check official Leicestershire County Council traffic updates or contact the test center directly for information on the road closure and its expected duration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to assess the potential impact of a significant road closure on their upcoming test. The challenge lies in balancing the need to arrive on time for the test with the responsibility to adhere to traffic regulations and make safe, informed decisions. Misjudging the situation could lead to missing the test, incurring additional costs, or, more critically, making unsafe driving choices under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves proactively seeking official information regarding the road closure and its expected duration. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of a driver to be prepared and informed, specifically checking the official Leicestershire County Council website or contacting the test center directly for updates on traffic disruptions and roadworks provides the most reliable and authoritative information. This proactive step ensures that any decision made is based on factual data, minimizing risk and demonstrating responsible planning. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes safety and adherence to official guidance, and it is professionally prudent by aiming to resolve the situation with minimal disruption and cost. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply assume the closure will not significantly impact the test route and proceed as planned without seeking any information. This fails to acknowledge the potential for unforeseen delays and demonstrates a lack of due diligence. It is professionally irresponsible as it relies on assumption rather than verified information, potentially leading to a missed appointment and wasted resources. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to find an alternative route by navigating through unmarked or potentially unsafe residential streets without consulting a reliable traffic app or local knowledge. This prioritizes speed over safety and adherence to traffic laws. It is ethically questionable due to the potential risks to other road users and pedestrians, and it is professionally unsound as it involves making decisions based on guesswork rather than informed judgment. A further incorrect approach is to contact the test center only after realizing the delay is significant and the test will likely be missed. While contacting the test center is important, doing so only when it is too late to rectify the situation is a reactive rather than proactive measure. This demonstrates poor planning and can lead to unnecessary frustration and inconvenience for both the driver and the test center staff, impacting the efficient operation of the testing service. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a proactive and information-gathering mindset. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the potential problem, road closure. 2. Seeking reliable and official information to understand the scope and impact of the problem. 3. Evaluating the gathered information to determine the best course of action, considering safety, regulations, and the objective, attending the test. 4. Communicating with relevant parties, test center, if necessary, based on informed decisions. Question 2. The review process indicates that a Leicestershire driving instructor has been providing lessons to their nephew, who is now approaching his practical driving test. The instructor is considering conducting the test themselves, as they believe they can ensure their nephew passes by being particularly lenient. What is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor to take? Option A. Conduct the test as planned, subtly guiding the nephew to avoid errors and ensure a pass, believing this is in the nephew's best interest. Option B. Inform the DVSA of the familial relationship and arrange for an independent examiner to conduct the practical driving test for their nephew. Option C. Disclose the familial relationship to the DVSA only if the nephew fails the test, to explain any perceived leniency. Option D. Proceed with instructing and testing their nephew, confident in their ability to remain objective and ensure a fair assessment. The correct answer is B. Inform the DVSA of the familial relationship and arrange for an independent examiner to conduct the practical driving test for their nephew. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest scenario involving a Leicestershire driving instructor. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to balance their personal financial interests with their duty to provide objective and fair instruction and assessment, as mandated by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, regulations. Maintaining public trust and ensuring road safety are paramount, and any perception of bias can undermine these core principles. The best professional approach involves proactively disclosing the relationship and recusing oneself from any assessment that could be perceived as biased. This aligns with the DVSA emphasis on maintaining high professional standards and avoiding conflicts of interest. Specifically, DVSA guidance stresses the importance of instructors acting with integrity and impartiality. By informing the DVSA and the learner's parents of the situation and arranging for an independent examiner, the instructor upholds their ethical obligations and adheres to the spirit and letter of regulatory expectations regarding fairness and transparency in driving instruction and testing. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the instruction and assessment without disclosure, assuming personal objectivity can overcome the appearance of bias. This fails to meet the DVSA requirement for transparency and could lead to accusations of favoritism, thereby compromising the integrity of the testing process. Another incorrect approach is to only disclose the relationship after the test, especially if the outcome is unfavorable for the learner. This reactive disclosure does not mitigate the initial ethical lapse and suggests an attempt to manage consequences rather than prevent them. Finally, attempting to subtly influence the assessment process, even with good intentions for the learner, is a severe breach of professional conduct and DVSA regulations, as it directly undermines the fairness and validity of the driving test. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, integrity, and adherence to regulatory guidance. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the first step is to identify it. Subsequently, one should consult relevant professional codes of conduct and regulatory guidelines. The next step is to consider the potential impact on all stakeholders, including the learner, the public, and the regulatory body. Finally, the decision should be made to act in a manner that is demonstrably fair, transparent, and compliant with all applicable regulations, even if it requires personal inconvenience or the arrangement of alternative solutions. Question 3. Performance analysis shows that a candidate undergoing their driving test in Leicester is presented with a route that appears longer than a potential shortcut they know. The candidate is considering whether to suggest the shortcut to the examiner or to simply take it if the opportunity arises, believing it will impress the examiner with their local knowledge and efficiency. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates professional conduct and adherence to the Leicester driving test requirements? Option A. Take the shortcut if the examiner appears distracted, hoping they won't notice. Option B. Deviate from the designated route to take the perceived shortcut without informing the examiner. Option C. Strictly follow the designated test route as instructed by the examiner, regardless of perceived shortcuts. Option D. Suggest to the examiner that they take a known shortcut, believing it will demonstrate efficiency. The correct answer is C. Strictly follow the designated test route as instructed by the examiner, regardless of perceived shortcuts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the overarching legal and safety requirements of the Leicestershire road network. The temptation to take a shortcut, even if seemingly minor, can lead to significant breaches of traffic law and compromise road safety, which is paramount in the UK's regulatory environment for drivers. Careful judgment is required to prioritize adherence to the law over personal expediency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the designated route provided for the Leicester driving test. This approach is correct because the driving test is designed to assess a candidate's ability to navigate and drive safely and legally within a controlled environment. Deviating from the prescribed route, even for a perceived shortcut, constitutes a failure to follow instructions and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the test's objectives and the importance of adhering to traffic regulations. The Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, guidelines, which govern driving tests in Leicester and across the UK, explicitly require candidates to follow the examiner's directions and the planned test route. This ensures a standardized assessment of driving competence and adherence to the highway code. Incorrect approaches analysis, taking a shortcut that deviates from the designated test route, even if it appears to save time, is professionally unacceptable. This action demonstrates a disregard for the test structure and the examiner's instructions, which is a direct violation of the test protocol. Ethically, it suggests an attempt to circumvent the assessment process, suggesting to the examiner that a different, unapproved route be taken, even if presented as a more efficient option, is also professionally unacceptable. This undermines the examiner's authority and the standardized nature of the test. It implies a lack of trust in the established assessment procedure and could be interpreted as an attempt to manipulate the test conditions. Ignoring the examiner's directions and proceeding on a route that the candidate believes is better without explicit permission is a serious professional failure. This exhibits a lack of discipline, an inability to follow instructions, and a potentially dangerous disregard for the examiner's judgment and the established safety protocols of the driving test. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any assessment scenario, including driving tests, must prioritize adherence to established procedures, regulations, and the instructions of the assessor. The decision-making process should involve understanding the purpose of the assessment, recognizing the authority of the examiner, and consistently applying the relevant rules and guidelines, in this case, DVSA regulations and the Highway Code. When faced with a choice between personal convenience and regulatory compliance, the latter must always take precedence. The focus should be on demonstrating competence within the defined parameters of the test, not on finding ways to alter or shorten the assessment. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that a driving instructor in Leicester is planning a lesson for a learner who has recently mastered basic clutch control but is still hesitant in busy traffic. Considering the DVSA emphasis on risk management, which of the following approaches best prepares the learner for independent driving while ensuring safety? Options. A. Plan a route that includes a variety of traffic conditions, from quieter residential streets to moderately busy junctions, with the instructor actively identifying potential hazards and discussing them with the learner before they become immediate threats, and being prepared to intervene using dual controls if necessary. B. Focus the entire lesson on practicing clutch control in a quiet, empty car park to build the learner's confidence, delaying any exposure to traffic until they are completely comfortable. C. Undertake a route with minimal traffic, primarily focusing on speed control and lane discipline on open roads, assuming the learner will naturally adapt to busier conditions later. D. Allow the learner to navigate a complex, high-traffic urban environment with minimal verbal guidance, encouraging them to learn from their own experiences, even if it involves making mistakes. Option A. Focus the entire lesson on practicing clutch control in a quiet, empty car park to build the learner's confidence, delaying any exposure to traffic until they are completely comfortable. Option B. Allow the learner to navigate a complex, high-traffic urban environment with minimal verbal guidance, encouraging them to learn from their own experiences, even if it involves making mistakes. Option C. Undertake a route with minimal traffic, primarily focusing on speed control and lane discipline on open roads, assuming the learner will naturally adapt to busier conditions later. Option D. Plan a route that includes a variety of traffic conditions, from quieter residential streets to moderately busy junctions, with the instructor actively identifying potential hazards and discussing them with the learner before they become immediate threats, and being prepared to intervene using dual controls if necessary. Correct answer is D. Plan a route that includes a variety of traffic conditions, from quieter residential streets to moderately busy junctions, with the instructor actively identifying potential hazards and discussing them with the learner before they become immediate threats, and being prepared to intervene using dual controls if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Leicester-based driving instructor due to the inherent risk associated with a learner driver's inexperience and the potential for unpredictable behavior on public roads. The instructor's primary duty is to ensure the safety of the learner, the public, and themselves, while also adhering to the specific requirements of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, for conducting driving lessons. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for practical experience with the imperative of maintaining a safe learning environment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and systematic approach to risk assessment, integrated into the lesson planning and delivery. This means identifying potential hazards specific to the planned route and the learner's current skill level before the lesson commences. It includes anticipating how the learner might react to these hazards and having predetermined strategies to mitigate risks, such as verbal guidance, dual control intervention, or route modification. This approach aligns with the DVSA emphasis on safe driving practices and the instructor's responsibility to provide effective, safety-conscious tuition. The instructor must continuously monitor the learner's performance and the environment, adapting their interventions as necessary. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on reactive interventions, only addressing hazards as they arise. This fails to meet the DVSA expectation of proactive risk management and can leave the learner unprepared for developing situations, increasing the likelihood of an incident. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to adequately prepare for potential dangers. Another unacceptable approach is to avoid challenging road conditions or complex traffic situations entirely, even if the learner is ready for them. While safety is paramount, this approach hinders the learner's development by not exposing them to the full spectrum of driving scenarios they will encounter independently. It also fails to adequately prepare them for the driving test, which will assess their ability to handle such situations. Finally, an approach that prioritizes covering a large amount of syllabus material over ensuring the learner's comprehension and safe execution of maneuvers is professionally unsound. This can lead to superficial learning and a false sense of confidence in the learner, potentially leading to dangerous driving habits and an increased risk of accidents. The focus must always be on quality of learning and safety, not just quantity. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a structured risk assessment framework. This involves 1. Hazard identification, what could go wrong. 2. Risk analysis, how likely is it to happen and what are the consequences. 3. Risk evaluation, is the risk acceptable. 4. Risk treatment, what can be done to reduce the risk. 5. Review, is the treatment effective? For driving instructors, this translates to pre-lesson planning, continuous observation during the lesson, and post-lesson debriefing, all underpinned by a commitment to the learner's safety and development in accordance with DVSA guidelines. Question 5. Investigation of a driving lesson in Leicester, UK, reveals a learner driver exhibiting significant signs of anxiety, including trembling hands and shallow breathing, shortly after commencing a maneuver. What is the most appropriate course of action for the approved driving instructor, ADDI, to take? Option A. Terminate the lesson immediately without further discussion or assessment. Option B. Instruct the learner to just get on with it, as they need to build resilience. Option C. Continue with the planned maneuver, encouraging the learner to push through their anxiety for the sake of progress. Option D. Safely pull over to a quiet location, offer reassurance and support, and assess the learner's ability to continue the lesson or reschedule. The correct answer is D. Safely pull over to a quiet location, offer reassurance and support, and assess the learner's ability to continue the lesson or reschedule. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester, UK, due to the inherent risks associated with a learner driver experiencing significant anxiety. Instructor must balance the learner's immediate emotional state with the overarching goal of safe and competent driving, all within the regulatory framework governing driver training in the UK. Failure to manage this situation appropriately could lead to a compromised learning experience, potential safety incidents, and a breach of professional duty of care. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves immediately pausing the lesson in a safe location, offering reassurance and support to the learner, and then assessing their readiness to continue or reschedule. This aligns with the ethical duty of care owed to the learner and the regulatory expectation that instructors provide a safe and conducive learning environment. The Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, guidelines emphasize the importance of learner welfare and ensuring they are in a suitable state to learn. By prioritizing the learner's immediate well-being and making a judgment based on their current capacity, the instructor acts responsibly and ethically, fostering trust and a positive learning relationship. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing the lesson as planned without addressing the learner's anxiety would be professionally unacceptable. This disregards the learner's emotional state, potentially exacerbating their fear and leading to unsafe driving decisions. It fails to meet the duty of care and contravenes the spirit of DVSA guidance on creating a supportive learning environment. Suggesting the learner just get on with it is dismissive and unprofessional. This approach ignores the psychological impact of anxiety on performance and demonstrates a lack of empathy and understanding, which is contrary to effective instruction and ethical practice. Ending the lesson abruptly without any attempt to de-escalate or assess the situation is also inappropriate. While safety is paramount, a complete cessation of the lesson without any supportive action fails to acknowledge the learner's distress and misses an opportunity to build resilience or reschedule effectively. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes learner welfare and safety. This involves 1. Immediate situational assessment, recognizing signs of distress. 2. De-escalation and support, creating a safe space for the learner to express their feelings. 3. Risk evaluation, determining if continuing the lesson poses an unacceptable risk. 4. Collaborative decision-making, discussing options with the learner, continue with modifications, pause, reschedule. 5. Documentation, noting the incident and the actions taken. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and aligned with regulatory requirements. Question 6. Comparative studies suggest that drivers facing time constraints often experience increased pressure to reach their destination quickly. In Leicester, if a driver is running late for an important appointment and realizes they have missed a green light, what is the most professionally responsible course of action to manage the situation while adhering to UK road regulations? Option A. Continue at a slightly increased speed to try and make up for the lost time on the subsequent stretch of road. Option B. Immediately attempt a U-turn at the next available safe point to find an alternative, potentially faster route. Option C. Accelerate through the junction to try and beat the red light, assuming no immediate traffic is present. Option D. Accept the delay, stop safely at the red light, and then proceed when it is safe and legal to do so, reassessing the route or appointment if necessary. The correct answer is D. Accept the delay, stop safely at the red light, and then proceed when it is safe and legal to do so, reassessing the route or appointment if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to reach a destination with the paramount importance of road safety and adherence to traffic laws. The pressure of being late can lead to impulsive decisions that compromise safety and legal compliance. Careful judgment is required to prioritize lawful and safe driving over personal urgency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive risk assessment that acknowledges the time constraint but prioritizes adherence to the highway code and safe driving practices. This approach recognizes that while being late is undesirable, it is a far lesser consequence than causing an accident, incurring penalties, or endangering oneself and others. Specifically, it involves mentally reviewing potential hazards, considering alternative routes if time is critically short and safe to do so, and accepting that arriving late is the responsible outcome if adherence to speed limits and traffic signals is necessary. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of care expected of all road users in the UK and the legal requirements of the Highway Code, which mandates safe and lawful driving at all times. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to increase speed significantly beyond the posted limit and disregard traffic signals to make up for lost time. This directly violates multiple provisions of the Highway Code, including rules on speed limits and obeying traffic signals, and creates an unacceptable risk of collision, endangering other road users and the driver. It demonstrates a failure to uphold the duty of care. Another incorrect approach is to engage in aggressive driving behaviors such as tailgating or making risky overtakes. These actions are not only dangerous and increase the likelihood of an accident, but also contravene the principles of considerate driving promoted by the Highway Code. They show a disregard for the safety and well-being of other road users. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the destination and ignore immediate road conditions or the behavior of other vehicles. This demonstrates a lack of situational awareness, which is a critical component of safe driving. It can lead to misjudging distances, failing to react to hazards, and ultimately contributing to accidents, thereby failing to meet the expected standard of care. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing time pressures should employ a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the time constraint and its potential impact on driving behavior. Second, conduct a rapid, ongoing risk assessment of the immediate driving environment. Third, consult the highway code and relevant legal requirements as the primary guide for all actions. Fourth, prioritize safety and legality over personal urgency. If time is critically short, consider if a safe and legal alternative route exists, or accept that arriving late is the only responsible option. This framework ensures that decisions are grounded in safety, legality, and ethical responsibility. Question 7. The investigation demonstrates that Mr. Henderson has been observed driving erratically in a residential area of Leicester, including sudden lane changes and excessive speed. Considering the potential risk to public safety, which of the following approaches best reflects a responsible and effective risk assessment? Option A. Immediately stop the vehicle based on the initial observation of speeding to address the immediate infraction. Option B. Continue to monitor the situation from a distance without intervening, assuming the behavior is not yet a significant threat. Option C. Focus solely on the excessive speed as the primary indicator of risk, disregarding other observed erratic maneuvers. Option D. Conduct a period of observation to establish a pattern of behavior, noting specific violations and the context of the driving, before deciding on the most appropriate intervention. The correct answer is D. Conduct a period of observation to establish a pattern of behavior, noting specific violations and the context of the driving, before deciding on the most appropriate intervention. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, has been observed exhibiting erratic driving behavior, including sudden lane changes and excessive speed, in a residential area of Leicester. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires immediate assessment of risk to public safety while balancing the need for swift intervention with due process. The potential for harm to pedestrians, cyclists, and other road users is significant, necessitating a proactive and responsible approach from the investigating officer. The best professional practice in this situation involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes immediate safety while gathering sufficient evidence for appropriate action. This approach involves observing the driver's behavior over a sufficient period to establish a pattern, noting specific violations, and considering the context of the driving. G. Time of day, presence of vulnerable road users. The goal is to determine if the driving constitutes a clear and present danger that warrants immediate intervention, such as a stop, or if it is a series of less severe but concerning infringements that might be addressed through other means. This aligns with the principles of road safety legislation in the UK, which empowers law enforcement to act when driving falls below the standard expected of a prudent driver and poses a risk. An incorrect approach would be to immediately stop the vehicle based on a single observation of speeding, without assessing the broader context or pattern of behavior. This could lead to an unnecessary stop, potentially causing disruption and mistrust, and might not address the underlying issue if the speeding was an isolated incident. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the behavior, assuming it is not serious enough to warrant intervention. This fails to uphold the duty of care to protect the public from potential harm and could have severe consequences if the driver's behavior escalates. Finally, focusing solely on the speed without considering the erratic lane changes and the residential setting would be an incomplete risk assessment, potentially leading to an inappropriate response that does not fully address the danger posed. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with situational awareness, followed by evidence gathering and risk evaluation. This involves asking, what is the observed behavior? What is the potential harm? What is the likelihood of that harm occurring? Based on this evaluation, the appropriate course of action, ranging from observation to immediate intervention, can be determined. Question 8. Assessment of a learner driver's performance during a lesson in Leicester, UK, reveals consistent instances of exceeding the speed limit by a noticeable margin and a failure to adequately check mirrors before changing lanes. The instructor is concerned about the escalating risk to road safety. Which of the following actions best reflects professional and regulatory requirements? Option A. Continue the lesson as planned, assuming the learner will eventually self-correct their behavior and discussing the issues at the end of the session. Option B. Allow the learner to continue driving in the unsafe manner, with the intention of providing a detailed debrief on their errors once the lesson is completed. Option C. Safely stop the vehicle at the earliest opportune moment, explain the concerns regarding speed and observation to the learner, and if the risk cannot be mitigated, terminate the lesson. Option D. Verbally reprimand the learner sternly for their actions without stopping the vehicle, emphasizing the seriousness of their mistakes. Correct answer is C. Safely stop the vehicle at the earliest opportune moment. Explain the concerns regarding speed and observation to the learner, and if the risk cannot be mitigated, terminate the lesson. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester, UK, as it involves balancing the immediate need to complete a lesson with the paramount importance of road safety and adherence to the highway code. The instructor must exercise sound judgment to assess the risk posed by the learner's behavior and the prevailing conditions, ensuring that the lesson does not compromise the safety of the learner, the instructor, or other road users. The pressure to complete the scheduled lesson time can create a conflict with the instructor's duty of care. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately assessing the severity of the learner's erratic driving and the potential for immediate danger. If the learner's actions demonstrate a clear and present risk to safety, such as consistently exceeding speed limits, failing to observe effectively, or demonstrating a lack of control, the instructor must take immediate action to ensure safety. This includes safely stopping the vehicle at the earliest opportune moment, explaining the concerns to the learner, and potentially ending the lesson prematurely if the risk cannot be mitigated. This approach aligns with the Driving Standards Agency (DVSA) guidelines, which emphasize the instructor's responsibility to ensure the safety of the learner and the public at all times. It also upholds the ethical obligation of a driving instructor to provide instruction that prioritizes safety above all else, even if it means deviating from the planned lesson structure or duration. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to continue the lesson as planned, hoping the learner will correct their behavior without intervention. This fails to address the immediate safety risks and could lead to an accident. It violates the DVSA emphasis on proactive risk management and the instructor's duty to intervene when safety is compromised. Another incorrect approach would be to verbally reprimand the learner harshly without taking any immediate safety measures. While communication is important, a purely verbal, aggressive response without ensuring the vehicle is safely controlled or stopped does not adequately mitigate the risk. This approach could also be demotivating for the learner and does not demonstrate professional control of the situation. A further incorrect approach would be to allow the learner to continue driving in a manner that is clearly unsafe, with the intention of discussing it thoroughly at the end of the lesson. This demonstrates a severe lapse in judgment and a failure to uphold the instructor's primary responsibility for safety during the lesson. The potential for an accident is too high to defer addressing the issue. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Continuous observation and assessment of the learner's performance and the surrounding environment. 2. Identification of potential hazards and risks. 3. Evaluation of the severity and likelihood of these risks. 4. Implementation of appropriate control measures, which may include verbal instruction, demonstration, or, in cases of immediate danger, stopping the vehicle and ending the lesson. The decision to stop the lesson should be based on a clear and present danger that cannot be immediately rectified through instruction. Question 9. Compliance review shows that a driving examiner conducting tests in Leicestershire has noted a candidate exhibiting significant nervousness, including occasional hesitation at junctions and a tendency to overcorrect steering. The examiner is considering passing the candidate because they believe the nervousness is the primary cause of these minor driving faults, and that the candidate would likely drive more confidently without the pressure of the test. What is the most appropriate approach for the examiner to take? Option A. Assess the candidate strictly against the DVSA fault reporting criteria and the Leicestershire driving test standards, documenting all observed minor faults and determining the pass or fail based solely on the cumulative effect of these faults on safe driving. Option B. Record the candidate's nervousness as a significant factor and pass them if the examiner feels they are generally a safe driver despite the minor errors. Option C. Pass the candidate, attributing the observed driving faults to test anxiety and assuming they will drive more safely in normal conditions. Option D. Focus on reassuring the candidate and downplaying the significance of minor driving faults to reduce their anxiety, potentially leading to a pass. The correct answer is A. Assess the candidate strictly against the DVSA fault reporting criteria and the Leicestershire driving test standards, documenting all observed minor faults and determining the pass or fail based solely on the cumulative effect of these faults on safe driving. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the need for thorough assessment with the potential for subjective bias and the impact of external factors on a candidate's performance. The examiner must adhere strictly to the Leicestershire County Council's driving test regulations and the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, guidelines for assessing risk, ensuring fairness and consistency for all candidates. The pressure to complete tests efficiently while maintaining high standards adds another layer of complexity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the examiner meticulously documenting all observations against the official Leicestershire driving test criteria, focusing solely on the candidate's driving performance and adherence to road traffic laws and the highway code. This approach ensures objectivity and provides a clear, defensible record of the assessment. The DVSA fault reporting system and the specific marking scheme for the Leicestershire test are designed to guide examiners in identifying and categorizing driving faults based on their risk level. By adhering strictly to these established criteria, the examiner upholds the integrity of the testing process and ensures that the assessment is fair, consistent, and legally sound, as mandated by the DVSA Operational Handbook. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing personal feelings or assumptions about the candidate's potential to influence the assessment. This introduces subjective bias, which is contrary to the DVSA requirement for objective evaluation. It undermines the fairness of the test and could lead to an inaccurate assessment of the candidate's ability to drive safely. Another incorrect approach is to overlook minor driving faults that, while not immediately dangerous, could indicate a developing risk or a lack of consistent safe driving habits. The DVSA fault categorization system includes specific criteria for minor faults, and consistently applying these is crucial for identifying candidates who may not yet possess the required level of competence for independent driving. Ignoring these can lead to a pass for an unsafe driver. A further incorrect approach is to focus excessively on the candidate's nervousness or external distractions, such as traffic conditions, rather than the candidate's direct actions and decisions. While an examiner should be aware of the context, the assessment must be based on how the candidate responds to these factors and whether their driving demonstrates a safe and controlled approach, as per the DVSA guidance on assessing hazard perception and response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the Leicestershire driving test and DVSA standards. 2. Objectively observing and recording all driving actions against these standards. 3. Categorizing observed faults according to the official marking scheme, considering their risk level. 4. Making a final decision based solely on the documented evidence and whether the candidate has met the required standard for safe driving. 5. Maintaining professional detachment and avoiding personal bias or external influences. Question 10. Regulatory review indicates a driver in Leicester is considering a £15,000 car loan over 5 years at an annual interest rate of 8.5% with an additional £200 administration fee. The driver's current net monthly income is £200 and their essential monthly outgoings, rent, utilities, food, insurance, are £100. They anticipate their income remaining stable. To ensure responsible borrowing, what is the most prudent approach to assessing the loan's affordability, considering the total financial commitment and potential financial strain? Option A. Focus on the monthly repayment amount and ensure it is less than the driver's total disposable income of £100 without specific regard to the total loan cost or a buffer for emergencies. Option B. Borrow the maximum amount the lender offers, assuming the monthly payment will be manageable as long as it is less than the driver's net monthly income of £200. Option C. Calculate the total loan repayment amount including interest and fees, then determine the monthly loan payment. Compare this monthly payment to the driver's disposable income, £200, £100 equals £100, ensuring the loan payment does not exceed 40% of their disposable income, and verify that a sufficient emergency fund buffer remains. Option D. Base the affordability assessment solely on the advertised monthly payment for the loan, without calculating the total interest and fees or considering the driver's essential outgoings. The correct answer is C. Calculate the total loan repayment amount including interest and fees, then determine the monthly loan payment. Compare this monthly payment to the driver's disposable income. £2, £200, 100 equals £1, 100. Ensuring the loan payment does not exceed 40% of their disposable income, and verify that a sufficient emergency fund buffer remains. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need for a vehicle with the long-term financial implications of a loan, all while operating within the regulatory framework of the UK's financial services and consumer credit laws. The driver must accurately assess their financial capacity to repay the loan, considering potential fluctuations in income and unexpected expenses, to avoid defaulting and facing severe consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure the loan is affordable and does not lead to financial distress. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough risk assessment that quantifies the driver's ability to service the loan. This includes calculating the total cost of the loan over its term, factoring in interest, fees, and any potential penalties for late payments. The driver should then compare this total cost against their projected disposable income, ensuring a significant buffer remains for unforeseen circumstances. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible lending and borrowing, as mandated by the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, in the UK, which emphasizes consumer protection and the prevention of unaffordable credit. Specifically, the FCA's Consumer Credit Sourcebook, (CONC), requires firms to assess affordability and ensure consumers are not put into default or hardship by calculating the loan-to-income ratio and the debt-to-income ratio, and ensuring these remain within prudent limits, e.g., a debt-to-income ratio below 40–50% is often considered a benchmark for manageable debt. The driver is proactively adhering to these regulatory expectations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to focus solely on the monthly repayment amount, without considering the total cost of the loan or the driver's overall financial stability. This fails to account for the cumulative effect of interest over the loan term and ignores potential future financial shocks, leading to an unaffordable commitment. This breaches FCA principles by not conducting a comprehensive affordability assessment. Another incorrect approach is to borrow the maximum amount the lender offers without independent verification of affordability. Lenders may offer higher amounts based on their own risk appetite, which may not align with the borrower's actual capacity to repay. This overlooks the borrower's responsibility to ensure the loan is manageable and can lead to over-indebtedness. Key concern for FCA regulation. A third incorrect approach is to rely on optimistic future income projections without a realistic assessment of potential shortfalls. Economic conditions can change, and unexpected life events can impact earnings. Basing financial decisions on unverified future income without a contingency plan is a failure of prudent financial planning and contravenes the spirit of responsible borrowing. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to risk assessment when considering significant financial commitments like vehicle loans. This involves 1. Understanding the total financial obligation. Calculate the total amount repayable, including all interest and fees. 2. Assessing current and projected income. Realistically evaluate all sources of income and potential fluctuations. 3. Estimating essential expenses. Account for all necessary living costs. 4. Calculating disposable income. Subtract essential expenses from income. 5. Evaluating debt-to-income ratios. Determine the proportion of income dedicated to debt repayment. 6. Stress testing. Consider how the financial situation would cope with unexpected events, e.g., job loss, illness. 7. Seeking independent advice. If unsure, consult a qualified financial advisor. This structured process ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and compliant with regulatory expectations for consumer protection. Question 11. Consider a scenario where a driver in Leicester notices a significant wobble in their car's steering while driving on a residential street. They recall that the car has been due for its MOT test for a week, and they know the wobble is a new development. What is the most responsible course of action to take regarding the vehicle's use? Option A. Continue using the vehicle for essential short journeys, assuming the steering wobble is minor and unlikely to cause an immediate accident. Option B. Ask a friend who is an experienced driver for their opinion on whether the wobble is serious enough to warrant stopping driving. Option C. Immediately stop using the vehicle and arrange for it to be inspected and repaired by a qualified mechanic before driving it again. Option D. Ignore the steering wobble and continue to use the vehicle as normal until the MOT test is due to be performed. The correct answer is C. Immediately stop using the vehicle and arrange for it to be inspected and repaired by a qualified mechanic before driving it again. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience against the established legal requirements for roadworthiness. The temptation to use a vehicle that is known to have a defect, even a minor one, presents a direct conflict between expediency and public safety, which is paramount in road traffic law. The driver's understanding of their responsibilities under the Road Traffic Act 1988, as amended, is crucial here. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing safety and legal compliance. This means immediately ceasing to use the vehicle until the defect is rectified and the vehicle is made roadworthy. This approach aligns directly with the legal obligations of a vehicle keeper under the Road Traffic Act 1988, specifically concerning the requirement that a vehicle must be in a condition that does not cause danger to any person. By not driving the vehicle, the driver upholds their duty of care to other road users and avoids potential prosecution for using a vehicle in a dangerous condition. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using the vehicle for a short, essential journey, believing the defect is minor and unlikely to cause immediate danger, fails to acknowledge the strict liability imposed by law. The law does not permit subjective assessments of risk by individual drivers. It mandates that vehicles must be roadworthy. This approach risks prosecution and, more importantly, endangers others. Ignoring the defect and continuing to use the vehicle as normal is a clear breach of legal duty. This demonstrates a disregard for road safety regulations and the well-being of the public. It exposes the driver to significant legal penalties and places other road users at unnecessary risk. Seeking advice from a friend who is also a driver, rather than a qualified mechanic or the DVSA, is an inadequate and potentially dangerous step. While informal advice might seem helpful, it does not substitute for professional assessment of roadworthiness. Relying on non-expert opinions can lead to misjudgments about the severity of the defect and the vehicle's safety, potentially resulting in continued illegal and unsafe use. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else. When a potential roadworthiness issue is identified, the immediate steps should be to 1. Assess the nature of the defect, if possible, but without making subjective judgments about safety. 2. Immediately cease using the vehicle if there is any doubt about its roadworthiness. 3. Seek professional advice from a qualified mechanic or relevant authority, like the DVSA, to determine the necessary repairs. 4. Ensure all repairs are completed and the vehicle is certified as roadworthy before resuming use. This systematic approach ensures that legal obligations are met and the safety of all road users is protected. Question 12. Upon reviewing a student's performance during a recent driving lesson in Leicester, a driving instructor observes consistent hesitation at junctions and a tendency to drift within their lane, particularly on busier roads. The student expresses strong confidence and is eager to book their practical driving test within the next 2 weeks. What is the most responsible course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Suggest the student book the test and assure them that the examiner will be understanding of minor hesitations. Option B. Book the practical driving test for the student as requested, assuming their confidence will help them overcome minor issues on the day. Option C. Focus only on the student's positive progress and book the test, leaving them to discover any significant shortcomings during the actual examination. Option D. Advise the student that they are not yet ready for the practical driving test and explain the specific areas of concern, recommending further practice before booking. The correct answer is D. Advise the student that they are not yet ready for the practical driving test and explain the specific areas of concern, recommending further practice before booking. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester, UK, regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of a student's perceived readiness for the driving test. The instructor must balance the student's eagerness with the paramount importance of public safety and adherence to DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency standards. Misjudging a student's competence can lead to dangerous situations on the road, potential accidents, and a failure to uphold professional responsibilities. The challenge lies in navigating the student's emotional state and potential pressure against objective assessment and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the student's driving skills against the DVSA test criteria. This includes evaluating their ability to drive safely and independently, demonstrating a good understanding of the highway code, and consistently applying safe driving techniques. If the assessment reveals any significant or recurring faults that would result in a fail on the practical test, the instructor must ethically and professionally advise against booking the test. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety, aligns with the DVSA mandate to ensure only competent drivers are licensed, and upholds the instructor's professional duty of care. It directly addresses the core requirement of the Leicester driving test syllabus, to assess a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently. Incorrect approach is analysis. Advising the student to book the test despite clear indications of unreadiness, based solely on their desire or the instructor's desire to secure a booking, is a serious regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the DVSA standards and the instructor's responsibility to ensure road safety. It could lead to the student failing the test, incurring unnecessary costs, and more importantly, potentially endangering themselves and others if they were to drive unsupervised before being truly ready. Another incorrect approach would be to book the test without a frank and honest discussion with the student about their current skill level and the specific areas needing improvement. This lack of transparency erodes trust and fails to equip the student with the knowledge of what they need to work on. Finally, pressuring the student to book the test by downplaying the seriousness of their faults is also professionally unacceptable, as it misrepresents their readiness and undermines the integrity of the testing process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Objective assessment, regularly and rigorously evaluating the student's performance against established testing standards. 2. Transparent communication, clearly and honestly discussing the student's progress, highlighting both strengths and weaknesses, and explaining what constitutes a safe and competent driver according to DVSA guidelines. 3. Ethical responsibility, recognizing the duty to protect the public by only endorsing students who meet the required competency standards. 4. Professional judgment, exercising independent judgment, free from external pressures, to make decisions that are in the best interest of road safety and the integrity of the licensing process. Question 13. When evaluating a learner driver's readiness for their Leicester driver's test, what is the most appropriate course of action for a driving instructor in the UK? Option A. Delay booking the test indefinitely, even if the learner is performing well, until they achieve a level of perfection beyond the standard test requirements. Option B. Recommend booking the test only after observing consistent demonstration of all required driving skills and adherence to road rules, indicating a high likelihood of passing. Option C. Book the test as soon as the learner expresses a strong desire to take it, regardless of their current skill level. Option D. Book the test based on the learner completing a predetermined number of lessons, without a comprehensive assessment of their practical driving ability. Correct answer is B. Recommend booking the test only after observing consistent demonstration of all required driving skills and adherence to road rules, indicating a high likelihood of passing. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need to assess a learner's ability to drive safely with the ethical obligation to ensure the learner is adequately prepared and not put at undue risk or risk to others. The instructor must consider the learner's current skill level against the requirements of the Leicester driver's test, which is governed by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, guidelines in the UK. The best approach involves the instructor making a professional judgment based on their direct observation of the learner's performance during the lesson. This means assessing whether the learner consistently demonstrates the required skills, understanding of road rules, and hazard perception to a standard that meets the DVSA expectations for the Leicester driver's test. If the learner is consistently performing well, showing good control, anticipation, and adherence to rules, the instructor should recommend booking the test. This aligns with the DVSA emphasis on practical competence and readiness, ensuring the learner is not rushed into a test they are unlikely to pass, which would be a waste of the learner's and the examiner's time and could negatively impact the learner's confidence. An incorrect approach would be to book the test solely based on the learner's expressed desire or a fixed number of lessons. This disregards the actual demonstration of competence and could lead to the learner failing the test, which is a poor use of resources and can be demotivating. Another incorrect approach is to delay booking the test indefinitely, even if the learner is performing well, out of an overabundance of caution or a desire for the learner to achieve absolute perfection. This can hinder the learner's progress and prevent them from gaining valuable test experience. Finally, booking the test without a thorough assessment of the learner's ability to handle common driving situations and potential hazards in the Leicester area would be irresponsible, as it fails to prepare the learner for the specific challenges they might encounter during the actual test. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective assessment of competence against established standards. This involves continuous evaluation of the learner's progress, comparing their performance against the DVSA test criteria, and engaging in open communication with the learner about their readiness. The decision to book a test should be a collaborative one, informed by the instructor's expert opinion and the learner's demonstrated ability. Question 14. The analysis reveals that during a driving lesson in Leicester, a learner driver begins to exhibit pronounced signs of panic, including shallow breathing, trembling hands, and difficulty maintaining lane discipline, which the instructor suspects is due to overwhelming anxiety. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Safely pull over to a quiet location, offer reassurance, and discuss the learner's ability to continue the lesson. Option B. Continue the lesson, encouraging the learner to focus and try to overcome their anxiety. Option C. Immediately end the lesson and ask the learner to exit the vehicle. Option D. Suggest the learner take deep breaths while continuing to drive on a less busy road. The correct answer is A. Safely pull over to a quiet location, offer reassurance, and discuss the learner's ability to continue the lesson. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common implementation challenge faced by driving instructors in Leicester, United Kingdom, when a learner driver exhibits signs of significant anxiety that could impair their ability to control a vehicle safely. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to balance the learner's desire to progress with their paramount duty of care to the learner, other road users, and the public. The instructor must make a swift, informed judgment under pressure, considering both the immediate safety implications and the long-term learning process of the student. The best professional approach involves prioritizing immediate safety and the learner's well-being. This means recognizing the signs of severe anxiety, assessing the immediate risk to road safety, and making the decision to stop the lesson in a safe manner. This aligns with the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, guidelines, which emphasize that instructors must ensure a learner is in a fit state to drive. It also reflects the ethical obligation of an instructor to act in the best interests of their student and the public. Safely pulling over to a quiet location, offering reassurance, and discussing the learner's feelings and readiness to continue or conclude the lesson is the most responsible course of action. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the learner's anxiety, pushing them to continue the lesson despite clear signs of distress. This fails to uphold the duty of care and could lead to a dangerous situation, potentially resulting in an accident. It also undermines the learning process by not addressing the root cause of the learner's difficulty. Another incorrect approach would be to abruptly terminate the lesson without ensuring the vehicle is safely stopped and the learner is in a secure environment. This could exacerbate the learner's anxiety and leave them in a vulnerable state. Finally, continuing the lesson while the learner is visibly struggling to concentrate or control the vehicle, hoping they will snap out of it, is a reckless disregard for safety and professional responsibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment. This involves observing the learner's behavior, recognizing potential safety hazards, and considering the impact of the learner's emotional state on their driving ability. If a significant risk is identified, the immediate priority is to mitigate that risk by safely stopping the vehicle. Subsequently, open communication with the learner about their feelings and readiness to continue is crucial. If the learner is not fit to drive, the lesson should be concluded or postponed, with appropriate advice and support offered. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a significant likelihood of a learner driver in Leicestershire exceeding speed limits based on recent lesson observations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Conduct a focused discussion with the learner about the dangers and consequences of speeding. Implement additional supervised practice sessions specifically targeting speed management and document the intervention. Option B. Continue with standard driving lessons, assuming the learner will naturally improve their speed awareness over time. Option C. Immediately cease all driving lessons with the learner due to the identified risk of speeding. Option D. Advise the learner that speeding is a minor issue and not a significant factor in passing their driving test. The correct answer is A. Conduct a focused discussion with the learner about the dangers and consequences of speeding. Implement additional supervised practice sessions specifically targeting speed management, and document the intervention. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential for significant financial loss due to a driver's repeated failure to adhere to speed limits, as indicated by multiple recorded instances. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need to maintain road safety and comply with traffic regulations in Leicestershire with the driver's right to continue learning and eventually obtain a driving license. The instructor must make a judgment call that is both ethically sound and legally compliant, considering the potential consequences of their decision on the learner driver, other road users, and the reputation of the driving school. The best approach involves a structured intervention that prioritizes safety and learning. This entails a frank discussion with the learner about the seriousness of their repeated speeding offenses, clearly outlining the risks involved and the potential consequences, including the impact on their ability to pass the driving test and their insurance premiums. Following this discussion, a formal plan should be developed, which might include additional supervised practice sessions specifically focused on speed management and adherence to limits, potentially in varied traffic conditions. The instructor should also document these discussions and the agreed-upon plan. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified risk, educates the learner, provides a clear path for improvement, and maintains a record of professional conduct, aligning with the general principles of responsible driver training and road safety legislation in the UK, which emphasizes the development of safe and competent drivers. An incorrect approach would be to simply continue with standard lessons without addressing the speeding issue directly. This fails to acknowledge the elevated risk demonstrated by the learner's behavior and neglects the instructor's duty of care to ensure the learner is not only capable of passing the test, but also a safe driver. This could be seen as a breach of professional standards and potentially contravenes the spirit of the Highway Code and DVSA guidance on driver training. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the lessons without attempting any remedial action or discussion. While safety is paramount, an immediate termination without a clear explanation or an opportunity for the learner to improve could be considered overly punitive and may not align with the progressive nature of driver education. It also misses an opportunity to coach the learner towards better decision-making. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to downplay the seriousness of the speeding offenses, perhaps attributing them to nervousness or minor lapses. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a failure to adequately assess and mitigate risk. It could lead to the learner continuing to drive unsafely, posing a danger to themselves and others, and ultimately failing their driving test due to this persistent issue. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, accurately identify and assess the risk, as indicated by the risk matrix. Second, communicate the identified risks clearly and constructively to the learner. Third, collaboratively develop a plan for improvement, incorporating targeted training and support. Fourth, document all interventions in progress. Finally, continuously monitor the situation and adjust the plan as necessary, always prioritizing safety and regulatory compliance. Question 16. Implementation of updated traffic signage regulations in Leicester requires careful consideration of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and Department for Transport Guidance, which approach best balances regulatory compliance, public safety, and practical execution for Leicester City Council. Option A. A reactive approach, only updating signage in Leicester when specific complaints or incidents necessitate it. Option B. A phased implementation strategy, prioritizing high-risk areas and arterial routes, preceded by a thorough review of existing signage against current guidelines and including public consultation. Option C. A focus on replacing signage in quiet residential streets first, deferring changes on busy roads until later. Option D. A simultaneous replacement of all signage across Leicester, regardless of risk or traffic volume, to ensure uniformity as quickly as possible. The correct answer is B. A phased implementation strategy, prioritizing high-risk areas and arterial routes, preceded by a thorough review of existing signage against current guidelines and including public consultation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Implementing new traffic signage regulations in Leicester presents a significant challenge due to the need to balance public safety, driver understanding, and the practicalities of installation and maintenance. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and associated Department for Transport (DFT) guidance, ensuring compliance while minimizing disruption and confusion for road users. The Leicester City Council must navigate potential public resistance, budgetary constraints, and the technical expertise required for accurate placement and visibility of signs. Careful judgment is required to select the most effective and compliant implementation strategy. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes high-risk areas and key arterial routes within Leicester. This approach begins with a thorough review of existing signage against the latest DFT guidelines and the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, identifying immediate noncompliance or safety concerns. Following this, a detailed plan is developed for replacing or supplementing signage, focusing on areas with a history of accidents or driver confusion. Public consultation is a crucial element, informing residents and businesses about upcoming changes, the reasons behind them, and the expected timeline. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal requirements of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, which mandates the use of prescribed signs and markings to regulate traffic and ensure safety. The DFT guidance provides the framework for this, emphasizing clarity and consistency. A phased approach, coupled with public engagement, ensures that the implementation is both legally sound and practically manageable, minimizing negative impacts on road users and maximizing the effectiveness of the new signage in enhancing road safety within Leicester. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing all new signage simultaneously across Leicester without prior risk assessment or public consultation is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to adhere to the principles of efficient resource allocation and risk management, potentially leading to widespread confusion and increased safety hazards if signs are erected incorrectly or in inappropriate locations. It also neglects the importance of public engagement, which is vital for fostering understanding and acceptance of traffic management changes. Focusing solely on replacing signage in low-traffic residential areas while neglecting major intersections and accident hotspots in Leicester is also professionally flawed. This strategy prioritizes convenience over safety and compliance with the spirit of traffic regulation, which is to manage traffic flow and prevent accidents effectively. It fails to address the most critical areas where improved signage is likely to have the greatest positive impact on road safety, thereby not fully meeting the objectives of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. Adopting a wait-and-see approach, where signage is only updated in response to specific complaints or incidents in Leicester, is a reactive and inadequate strategy. This approach is ethically questionable, as it prioritizes avoiding immediate effort over proactively ensuring public safety and regulatory compliance. It fails to meet the proactive obligations for maintaining safe and legally compliant road infrastructure, as implied by the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and DFT guidance. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing traffic signage regulations in Leicester should adopt a systematic, risk-based, and consultative approach. This involves 1. Understanding the legal framework Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and relevant guidance DFT. 2. Conducting a comprehensive audit of existing signage to identify gaps and noncompliance. 3. Prioritizing implementation based on accident data, traffic volume, and potential safety risks. 4. Developing a clear project plan with realistic timelines and resource allocation. 5. Engaging with stakeholders, including the public, to explain changes and gather feedback. 6. Monitoring the effectiveness of implemented signage and making adjustments as necessary. This structured decision-making process ensures that implementation is efficient, effective, legally compliant, and serves the primary goal of enhancing road safety for all users in Leicester. Question 17. To address the challenge of a learner driver in Leicester consistently making minor infringements, such as slightly exceeding the speed limit or imprecise signaling, during their lessons, what is the most professionally sound course of action for the driving instructor to take? Option A. Adopt a highly critical and punitive tone with the learner, emphasizing the severity of even small mistakes to instill a sense of urgency. Option B. Overlook these minor infringements, assuming they are not significant enough to impact the learner's overall progress towards the practical driving test. Option C. Offer vague advice to the learner to be more careful, without providing specific examples or corrective instruction. Option D. Engage in a direct, constructive conversation with the learner, clearly explaining the importance of strict adherence to all traffic laws and DVSA test requirements, and then implement focused practice sessions to reinforce correct techniques. The correct answer is D. Engage in a direct, constructive conversation with the learner, clearly explaining the importance of strict adherence to all traffic laws and DVSA test requirements, and then implement focused practice sessions to reinforce correct techniques. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester, UK, concerning the ethical and regulatory implications of a learner driver's persistent, albeit minor, rule bending during lessons. The challenge lies in balancing the need to prepare the learner for the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, practical driving test, which requires adherence to strict rules, with the instructor's duty of care and professional integrity. The instructor must decide how to address the learner's behavior without jeopardizing their progress or compromising the integrity of the training. The best approach involves a direct, constructive conversation with the learner about the importance of adhering to all traffic laws and DVSA test requirements. This approach involves clearly explaining that even minor infringements, such as slightly exceeding speed limits or failing to signal precisely, are unacceptable during the test and can lead to failure. The instructor should then reinforce correct practices through focused drills and feedback, ensuring the learner understands the rationale behind each rule. This aligns with the DVSA emphasis on safe driving and adherence to the highway code, which are fundamental to passing the test and becoming a responsible driver. Ethically, the instructor has a duty to provide accurate and comprehensive training, which includes instilling a strong understanding of and respect for traffic regulations. An incorrect approach would be to overlook these minor infringements, assuming they are insignificant. This fails to meet the professional standard of preparing the learner adequately for the DVSA test, where even small errors can be penalized. It also ethically compromises the instructor's duty to ensure the learner understands and respects all traffic laws, potentially leading to unsafe driving habits. Another incorrect approach is to become overly critical or punitive, which can demotivate the learner and create anxiety, hindering their learning process. While firm guidance is necessary, a harsh tone can be counterproductive and does not foster a positive learning environment. This approach neglects the pedagogical aspect of driving instruction. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to simply tell the learner to be careful, without specific instruction or correction. This is vague and does not provide the learner with the concrete guidance needed to understand and correct their behavior. It abdicates the instructor's responsibility to provide clear, actionable feedback and instruction, which is a core ethical and professional obligation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear communication, adherence to regulatory standards, in this case, DVSA guidelines and the Highway Code, and ethical considerations of duty of care and professional integrity. This involves assessing the learner's behavior against established standards, providing targeted feedback, and adapting teaching methods to address specific learning needs and behavioral patterns, always with the ultimate goal of producing a safe and competent driver. Question 18. Examination of the data shows a learner driver in Leicester during a lesson begins to exhibit noticeable signs of distress, including fidgeting, shallow breathing, and a delayed reaction to a traffic signal change. The driving instructor must decide on the most appropriate immediate course of action. Option A. Safely pull over to the side of the road, stop the vehicle, and assess the learner's condition, offering support and discussing whether to continue the lesson. Option B. Ignore the signs of distress and continue the lesson, assuming the learner will recover their composure naturally. Option C. Immediately end the lesson and instruct the learner to drive home alone, advising them to sleep it off. Option D. Continue the driving lesson as planned, encouraging the learner to focus and push through their discomfort. Correct answer is A. Safely pull over to the side of the road, stop the vehicle, and assess the learner's condition, offering support and discussing whether to continue the lesson. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester by requiring them to navigate a situation where a learner-driver exhibits signs of distress and potential impairment, impacting their ability to safely control a vehicle. The instructor must balance the learner's immediate emotional state with the paramount duty of public safety and adherence to the highway code and DVSA guidelines. The professional challenge lies in making an immediate, on-the-spot decision that prioritizes safety without unnecessarily alarming or discouraging the learner, while also fulfilling legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately assessing the situation for safety, and if deemed unsafe, stopping the vehicle in a safe location and offering support. This approach aligns with the DVSA emphasis on learner safety and the instructor's duty of care. The Highway Code, specifically Rule 56, states that drivers must not drive if they are too tired to do so safely. While this applies to qualified drivers, the principle extends to instructors ensuring their learners are in a fit state to drive. The instructor's primary responsibility is to ensure the safety of the learner, the instructor, and other road users. Therefore, stopping the vehicle and offering assistance, rather than continuing the lesson or dismissing the learner abruptly, is the most responsible and ethical course of action. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing the lesson as normal, despite observing signs of distress and potential impairment, would be a significant failure of the instructor's duty of care. This disregards the potential for impaired judgment and reaction times, creating an unacceptable risk to all road users, and contravenes the spirit of the Highway Code and DVSA guidance on safe driving. Suggesting the learner just push through it is equally unprofessional and dangerous. It dismisses the learner's distress, potentially exacerbates their condition, and prioritizes lesson completion over safety, which is a direct ethical and regulatory breach. Telling the learner to go home and sleep it off, without first ensuring the vehicle is safely parked and the learner is in a stable condition to leave the vehicle, is also problematic. While the intention might be to address the issue, it fails to manage the immediate safety risk of the learner being in control of a vehicle in a compromised state. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. The immediate priority is to mitigate any immediate risk to safety. This involves a quick but thorough assessment of the learner's condition and the surrounding environment. If there is any doubt about the learner's ability to drive safely, the default action should be to stop the vehicle in a safe place. Following this, open communication with the learner, offering support and understanding, is crucial. The decision to continue, postpone, or end the lesson should be based on this safety assessment and the learner's well-being, always in adherence to regulatory guidelines and ethical principles of care. Question 19. Research into the requirements for learner drivers in Leicester, UK, has highlighted a situation where a driving instructor observes subtle but consistent signs that a learner might have an undisclosed medical condition affecting their driving. What is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action for the instructor to take? Option A. Refuse to conduct any further driving lessons with the learner until they provide a doctor's note confirming they are fit to drive. Option B. Continue with the driving lessons as usual, assuming the learner is aware of and managing any potential medical conditions themselves. Option C. Immediately report the suspected undisclosed medical condition to the DVLA and local police without speaking to the learner. Option D. Initiate a direct and sensitive conversation with the learner, expressing concerns about their fitness to drive and advising them to consult their doctor and inform the DVLA if any medical condition might affect their ability to drive safely. The correct answer is D. Initiate a direct and sensitive conversation with the learner, expressing concerns about their fitness to drive and advising them to consult their doctor and inform the DVLA if any medical condition might affect their ability to drive safely. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Leicester, UK, concerning the ethical and regulatory implications of a learner driver's potential undisclosed medical condition. The instructor is tasked with ensuring road safety, adhering to DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, regulations, and maintaining professional integrity. The challenge lies in balancing the learner's desire to progress with the paramount importance of public safety and legal compliance, without overstepping professional boundaries or making unsubstantiated accusations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a direct, yet sensitive, conversation with the learner about their fitness to drive, referencing the DVSA guidance on medical conditions. This approach prioritizes transparency and empowers the learner to take responsibility for disclosing relevant information. It aligns with the DVSA emphasis on drivers informing the DVLA, Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency, of any medical condition that could affect their ability to drive safely. By encouraging the learner to consult their doctor and inform the DVLA, the instructor acts ethically and within regulatory expectations, ensuring that the learner is compliant and that road safety is not compromised due to an undisclosed condition. This proactive step mitigates risk for all road users. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves ignoring the instructor's suspicions and continuing with lessons as normal. This is professionally unacceptable, as it disregards the potential risk to public safety and breaches the instructor's duty of care. It fails to address the possibility of an undisclosed medical condition that could impair driving ability, thereby contravening the spirit and letter of DVSA regulations concerning driver fitness. Another incorrect approach is to report the learner to the DVLA or police without first speaking to the learner. This is premature and potentially damaging to the learner's reputation and privacy. It bypasses the opportunity for open communication and assumes guilt without due process. Professional conduct dictates that concerns should be addressed directly with the individual involved first, allowing them to provide clarification or take appropriate action. A further incorrect approach is to refuse to teach the learner further lessons without a clear explanation or offering support. While safety is paramount, an outright refusal without attempting to understand the situation or guide the learner towards compliance can be seen as unprofessional and unsupportive. It fails to offer a constructive path forward, such as encouraging the learner to seek medical advice and inform the DVLA, which is a more ethical and effective resolution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a framework that prioritizes open communication, adherence to regulations, and ethical considerations. The process involves 1. Identifying a potential concern based on observed behavior or information. 2. Approaching the individual directly and sensitively to discuss the concern, referencing relevant guidelines, in this case, DVSA on medical fitness to drive. 3. Encouraging the individual to take responsibility for their obligations, such as consulting a medical professional and informing the DVLA. 4. Documenting the conversation and any agreed-upon actions. 5. Escalating the concern only if the individual refuses to engage or take appropriate steps, and then only through established channels. Question 20. During a practical driving test in Leicester, a student, while attempting a maneuver, momentarily hesitates before proceeding, causing a slight delay for a single following vehicle which has ample space to stop safely. The driving instructor, observing from the back seat, is concerned this hesitation might be interpreted as a serious fault by the examiner, which approach would be most professionally appropriate for the instructor to consider when assessing the situation and advising the student post-test. Option A. Suggest the student should have stopped completely and waited for a larger gap, even if it meant significantly disrupting traffic flow, to avoid any perception of risk. Option B. Instruct the student that any hesitation that causes a delay to another vehicle is automatically a serious fault, and they should have been more assertive. Option C. Advise the student that the hesitation, while causing a minor delay, likely constitutes a minor fault if no other vehicles were endangered and the highway code was not breached, and focus on reinforcing safe decision-making. Option D. Recommend the student try to bluff their way through the rest of the test, hoping the examiner overlooks the hesitation as a minor issue. The correct answer is C. Advise the student that the hesitation, while causing a minor delay, likely constitutes a minor fault if no other vehicles were endangered and the highway code was not breached, and focus on reinforcing safe decision-making. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need for a student to pass their test with the paramount responsibility of ensuring road safety and adherence to the highway code. The instructor must make a judgment call that could have significant implications for the student's future driving ability and the safety of other road users. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the severity of the student's error and its potential impact, while also considering the practicalities of the test environment and the examiner's discretion. The best approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the student's performance against the official Leicester driving test criteria, specifically referencing the DVSA guide to requirements for approved driving instructors. This means recognizing that a minor fault, while undesirable, may not automatically lead to a fail if it does not compromise safety or contravene specific rules. The instructor should focus on the cumulative effect of errors and the overall demonstration of safe driving. The Highway Code, specifically sections relating to hazard perception and appropriate responses, provides the regulatory framework for judging the severity of the student's action. If the student's maneuver, despite being imperfect, did not create a dangerous situation or violate a specific rule, e.g., failing to stop a stop sign, it might be classified as a minor fault. The instructor's role is to guide the student towards understanding the nuances of fault grading, not to manipulate the outcome. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume a serious fault based on the instructor's personal anxiety or a misunderstanding of the fault grading system. For instance, if the instructor incorrectly categorizes a minor hesitation or a slightly imperfect lane position as a dangerous or serious fault without considering the context or the DVSA fault assessment guidelines, they are failing to apply the correct regulatory standards. Another incorrect approach is to advise the student to deliberately perform a maneuver in a way that might be perceived as overly cautious or even obstructive, solely to avoid any perceived risk of a fault. This deviates from the goal of teaching competent and safe driving within the established rules and could lead to the student developing poor driving habits. Furthermore, suggesting the student hope the examiner doesn't notice is ethically unsound and undermines the integrity of the testing process. The professional reasoning process should involve 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the Leicester driving test and the DVSA fault grading system. 2. Objectively assessing the student's action against the Highway Code and the criteria for minor, serious, and dangerous faults. 3. Considering the cumulative impact of all faults. 4. Prioritizing road safety and adherence to regulations above all else. 5. Providing constructive feedback to the student that promotes learning and improvement, regardless of the test outcome.